Welcome, everyone, and thanks for joining us for the Fine Tune Your Job Search Career by Design webinar. We're very happy to have you participate today. And just so you know, we will be sending the slides with the follow-up survey afterwards. So keep that in mind in terms of any note-taking you want to do. And there will be some Q&A time in the webinar, and you'll be able to click on the purple arrow on the lower right-hand corner to access the chat menu, and you'll be able to participate through the chat box there. And my name is Michele Rapp. I'm Associate Director of Alumni Career Strategy in the Office of Alumni Relations, and I'm here with my colleague Diana Bronchek, who's a program assistant with us, and she'll be helping to moderate today. I'm the person that works to organize lots of different programs and resources for alumni for professional development. And I'm always interested in ideas and topics that you may be interested in. So please feel free to let me know about that. So topics we'll be covering today, talking about networking strategies, some tips on LinkedIn, thoughts on using social media in your job search, some quick pointers about any age-related concerns and how to handle them, and also the challenge of, how do you stay on top of your goals, how to be productive in your job search, and then action steps and resources. So my goal today is that I hope you hear some ideas that maybe are new that you want to implement, or that you're reminded of some things and that you commit to taking some action. So I think a good job search is about trying different things, changing it up sometimes. So again, I'm going to ask you at the end of the day to think about what next. We're going to start by talking about networking, and I'm going to start with a quick poll to see. Oh, actually, sorry, I'm going to step back once, ahead of myself here. So just to get a sense of what's on your mind today, I'm wanting to know what are some challenges you're facing in your job search. So feel free to type some ideas into the chat box. And you can access that on the lower right-hand side from the purple arrow menu. So any thoughts on challenges that you're facing in your job search? Great, so lots of varied items here, and this is helpful. I'm going to keep these in mind as we go through the content here, but also feel free to jump in with them again if I haven't addressed them. So we've got transferable skills, dealing with the application process, finding a good team, being overqualified, location, and not getting a response. That's one I hear quite often. And definitely figuring out your own next direction. And we'll talk a bit about transferable skills as well. So lots of good questions here. Thank you. And there'll be some other opportunities to ask more questions. All right, now the poll. So I'm interested in knowing, with networking, what's your primary type of networking that you're doing? Informational interviews, attending association events and meetups, communicating on LinkedIn, or using personal contacts? So a poll is going to show up on the screen, and you can just click on the corresponding answer. Okay, interesting. So it looks like using personal contacts is the high one, which is which is a good thing, and followed by communicating on LinkedIn. And it looks like informational interviews and events are somewhat similar. Oh, actually, we lost the, okay, there we go. Great. So the good news is that you are using some different networking strategies. And a note about personal contacts is obviously those are people that know you and probably want to help you. So definitely think about who you know in your community, in your activities, and in your family even. I want to highlight a few things. So, one of the things that came up in the chat is, not hearing back, that you apply for things. I hear this all the time. Applying for things, not hearing back is a common dilemma. One of the reasons why I find networking is motivating for people and helpful is, one, it gives you a chance to get in front of people as opposed to being at your computer. You are getting information, and you're often getting feedback and reinforcement that your skills are good, or you're getting feedback about what you need to do differently, and you're getting insight. So I feel like networking can take more time, but I think you get a lot out of it that's really important for your job search. You definitely want to take advantage of your Northeastern network as well as any other schools that you're connected with. And I've put a link here, and also just will tell you that on LinkedIn, if you search for Northeastern University and get the official Northeastern page, there's a button there that says see alumni or find alumni. And once you click on that, you can do all kinds of searches. You can search geographically for alumni in your area. You can search by keywords and industry and job titles. So I think in many cases, you'll find that you can reach out to alumni and hear back from them. I think a really important thing to do when you're reaching out to people is to let them know why you want to speak with them, something specific. I think when I get requests from people, I want to know that they're going to use my time well. And sometimes even just saying I'm interested in knowing about trends in the field or your insights into a certain employer. And I think many of you know that what you're trying to avoid is approaching people to say, do you know of any job openings? Obviously, you're going to ask that question, or you can ask that question, but you're not leading with that question. And the reason is that's often a yes-no question. Sometimes people ask me that, and I don't know of any job openings, so it kind of shuts down the conversation. But if you say, I'd love to talk to you to get your insights into what's happening in the biotech industry, that's a good place to start. And as you build some trust and rapport with someone in a conversation, you can ask them about insights into job searching or best approach to job search with that employer. And you can, with informational interviews, you can ask lots of different questions as well. You can get resume feedback. You can ask people about a job search strategy. So there's really just a lot of good information. Once you have rapport with someone, you can also ask them for suggestions of other people to contact, other organizations to look at, other employers to look at. And many people will be willing to make an introduction or share that information if they have some good rapport with you. Professional and association events are a great way to just, you just want to be out there as a job seeker. Sometimes it can even be helpful to go to an association that's related to your area, but not the one that you usually go to. I once went to a marketing association event, and I was in a unique position as a career coach, and that was actually beneficial to me. And also with your personal network, that could be volunteering, it can be friends of friends, it can be people you commute with, people at your gym, so hairdressers, bartenders, so just being aware of who you know. And sometimes saying to people something specific that you're looking for, I'm looking to make contacts at a certain employer. Do you have any suggestions, or might you know of anyone? And again, that tends to be a more fruitful conversation than talking about job openings. Getting together with people for lunch face-to-face, these might be your former colleagues. Inviting people to an event is a nice way to maintain your network. A lot of times people will ask me, how do I keep things going with my contacts? Sending an article, inviting people to an event, sending holiday cards, all of those ways keep things going. Also, if you go to a seminar or a conference, even if it's a field that you're trying to move into, you're seen as an insider. So you're not seen as someone who's knocking on the door or trying to get in. And those can be really rich contacts that you meet at a more in-depth event like that. And obviously, we want you to come to alumni events like you are today. And again, meetups have become a place, especially in certain industries like software, where there are a lot of professional meetups happening, and that's meetup.com. If you are in a full-time job search in particular, I think it is useful to also get out of the house, try a co-working space, go to the library, work at a cafe, because one, it changes things up and gets you moving, but also you're increasing the likelihood of different interactions that you might have. Any questions that people want to ask about networking? I'm just going to pause here for a minute. Feel free to type a question into the chat box. Networking with a full-time job, that can be tricky. You know, so networking is great to have face-to-face, but sometimes when people are relocating, or again, just due to constraints on time, like having a 20 to 30-minute phone conversation or even a Skype conversation with someone can work really well. I have a colleague, Jane Matson, who's actually an alum, and she started having what she calls coffee chats to keep her network going. And what she does is she schedules coffee chats by phone from 8:30 to 9 in the morning, so before the workday. And she's using that really to maintain her network. And I'll follow up about some information about Middle East events. Okay, I'm going to move on to start talking about LinkedIn. And I want to get your thoughts on what makes for a strong LinkedIn profile. So when you look at other people's profiles, what stands out to you as something effective that people are doing? What makes you take note? So Paul is saying a great headline. Thank you, and I'm going to talk about that. Oh, 2 headlines, yes. I'm going to talk about that in a minute. Very important. Anything else that makes for a strong profile? What about some things that make for a bad profile? That's another way we can go. And Pat is saying endorse skills, right? So things like that, like recommendations, obviously avoiding typos. I'm going to talk about summaries. That's very important because that's the first thing that people see. And definitely having a good picture, because it's so visual. We're visual people. That's the first thing that people see. And yes, no vacation pictures, no other people in the pictures. And it has become common to have a picture. And so I would recommend getting a good picture. And in response to Katie's question, I prefer to see bullets about each position. I feel like that's better information. And in terms of that, you're going to want to emphasize things that are relevant. So that's the key thing, like with a resume, is you just want to get rid of stuff that doesn't match your current goals. And Sandy's pointing out, too, that you can upload documents. You can link to other websites or portfolios. Absolutely, showing evidence of your experience and credentials. Very important, as well as having recommendations. And those can be particularly important, if you've had short stints at a job or had a job loss. Having the recommendations is part of your marketing strategy. And Sandy's talking about the recommendations being varied and strong. And know that when you ask people for a recommendation, you can ask them to speak to certain aspects of your background or your work together. That's something that I did. And you can say that one recommendation speaks to a certain skill set. You're asking someone else to speak to a different skill set. Great, thank you. So some things about your LinkedIn profile. We were talking about headings. So what I like here, I hope you can see it well enough, is under Donna's name rather than a job title. So a lot of people used to put their current job title, but you can put some of your key areas. So she has social media trainer, visual marketing specialist, and then she lists some things: blogging, Facebook, Twitter, Pinterest, Instagram, infographics. So this is a more creative way to highlight some different areas and catch people's interest. Like with your resume, it's about accomplishments. How did you have an impact? What did you initiate, fix, improve, increase, decrease? Using numbers, whether it's dollars saved or you increase sales by a certain percentage. So using numbers where you can is also effective. But those are the kind of things, and it's true for your resume also, that become differentiators. Having a summary was mentioned, and I'm going to show you a summary later on for a resume sample. A key thing is, on LinkedIn, I'm finding that the summaries are a little more conversational, so know that that's okay. And you have a little bit more space to work with than on a resume. But with LinkedIn, you still want to keep in mind that people are scanning, that they're not spending a lot of time. So don't make it too dense with text. So my favorite piece of advice is to look at other people's profiles and steal good ideas. Really looking at people's profiles is like looking at resumes. You have this advantage of seeing, what is the competition doing and saying. So you might, especially, I often recommend this for summaries because I think people have a hard time with writing a summary. So look at what other people are doing and see what you like. The other thing is to notice, where else have people worked? It might give you ideas for some employers as well. You might also see information about professional associations that people are involved with. Like with a resume, asking for feedback on your resume, on your LinkedIn profile is good. Try to get rid of things that are irrelevant. And so in the category of social media, it can be useful to post things. You can write articles and post them on LinkedIn. You can comment on other people's writings. You can follow people in your field or anyone that interests you. So all that kind of participation can be beneficial. It can help get you noticed. We do have a Northeastern University alumni group. And I think that because of some of the changes on LinkedIn with groups, that groups are not always as active as they could be. But join some groups and participate and see what happens. It can be a useful way to participate in your field. And I'm just going to respond to Sandy's question. So tailoring, especially with resumes and CVs, is always a good idea. And you can have different versions based on your audience. And we can say more about that when we get to resumes. A few tips on social media. So one is, depending on your field, it might be more important or less important for you to engage with varied social media. I'd say people in marketing, branding, maybe some tech areas, graphic design, things like that are often people want to see that you're really active with social media. So know what makes sense in your field, try things out, use it in a way that matches your brand, your goals. I know a friend that would get lots of great information by following companies and following thought leaders in her field and being active and responding to posts. Great. So Jennifer is saying that, posting things related to her field from credible sources often get interest in people following her. If anyone want to share just any other ideas about strategies that are effective with LinkedIn or other social media? See if there's any other ideas people want to share. Okay, I'm going to move on and maybe we'll incorporate some other ideas. Thank you, Mark. You're getting to one of my pet peeves. So LinkedIn is not Facebook. It is a professional site. And also to say I've seen people use Facebook, which I treat more personally. I've seen people post professional questions there or ask for help related to their job search. So that can actually work. But yeah, treat LinkedIn fully professionally. Yeah, know what other websites might be used. Like Sandy's talking about a particular educator site, so there could be things specific to your field. Colleen's mentioning Twitter, good for articles and resources. And Katie, you're asking about linking to people where you're applying to. Something I didn't mention is that when you are making a connection request on LinkedIn, I would always include a personal note. I really don't like getting requests from strangers when I can't figure out who is this person and why are they trying to connect with me. If you're able to make a reason why someone should connect, even if it's being an alum, that can be helpful. But yeah, I think it's fine to reach out to people where you're applying. And thanks, Sandy, for these other websites. Great. So related to LinkedIn is your resume. And Jennifer's asking the 1 or 2 page $1 million question. So conciseness is always good. I often tell people that sometimes around age 30, it gets hard to contain your experience on 1 page. So at the same time that it's good to have 1 page, I don't want someone that has significant experience to shortchange themselves by keeping things too basic. So see how your content is. You also want to keep your font 10 point, 11 point. You don't want to go tiny. So it is about readability. But you're right. People are glancing at your resume for 30 seconds, maybe a minute. And you're right, academia, you can have longer resumes and CVs. So that's where you might get some feedback from me or some, just weigh the options. And sometimes it is totally fine to have a 2-page resume. And CVs are more typically used in academia or in research-related things. That's a whole separate topic, so I'm going to have to not go into that in great detail. And also to say that, right, your level of experience is also going to dictate a likelihood of a second page. So we were talking about summaries with LinkedIn. So the summary is a short marketing pitch, and I'm going to show you a sample in a minute. It states your brand. It can be a great way if you have diverse experience to tie your experience together. But you are pitching yourself and your key areas of knowledge and experience related to what you're trying to do. Being targeted with your resume, being customized is very valuable. Sometimes people are pursuing a couple of different related career directions, and I recommend having a separate resume for 2 to 3 different directions. But doing some customization is helpful, and oftentimes a job description is a good guide as to what employers are looking for. So use the job description to notice if there's certain software that I should have on my resume. Or notice what seems to be the emphasis. And over time, you can really incorporate those things into your resume. I think many of you are familiar with employers using these applicant tracking systems, which can be challenging for us job seekers. But what it means is you want to use keywords of your profession. If there's software beyond the basics, beyond Microsoft Office, software should be in your resume as well, because these tracking systems will pick those up as keywords. Again, you want things to be easy to read. Remember that someone might be scanning, that they might not be reading things. For me, my big pet peeve is a dense block of text. It just makes me not want to read it. So even looking at your resume from far, does it look dense? Does it look hard to read? Is really important. If you are changing career direction, you're going to want to emphasize your transferable skills. So what from your previous work is relevant to your new line of work? Also think about, with the bullets on your resume, put more important things on the top of your list. Because I think sometimes people are scanning, they might just look at those things first. Know that you can include things like volunteer work, you can include professional development and associations and conferences. And I wanted to mention just something about templates. So there's a lot of templates online that you can get through different channels. Microsoft Word has templates. I think what can be good about a template is they can give you a modern look. It has sort of a graphic design style, and that can add some oomph to the resume. And on the con side, what I've seen is some ones that I just think don't use the space well, and some of them don't let you change the template. So I've seen things where the person's name is huge and takes up too much space. I've seen things where there's big blocks of white space that goes unused, and I think it just is difficult to read, or many of them have 2 columns, and sometimes I feel like important information gets lost. So, look at a lot of different templates, see if it adds something. And you can also look at a template and see what you like and see if you can put some of those elements into your own resume. Like sometimes there might be a line or a use of color that can make your resume look fresh, but you can still do it without the template. And here are 2 resume summary samples. One is a short couple of sentences. And I think what's key here is it's not too long, and it also should be the higher level skills. So this is not a place to say really general things. You're not saying that you're reliable, that you're a team player, that you work independently and with a team. Like those very vague things is not what you want for the summary. And I'm a big fan of bullets, so I kind of like things in the second one where you're stating some general things and then highlighting some strong areas of your expertise. I think bullets are good because they stand out, they get people's attention, and you can even use bullets within a cover letter.
Michelle, there is a question from Wayne. Is there a standard number of bullets to use for each job listed on the resume?
There is not. What I find to be true is that 1, it's always about relevance, and then 2, in general, people's more recent jobs will often have more bullets because it's what they're doing currently. I would say the number of bullets is often in proportion to the number of years that you worked in a job. So if a job was 1 year and having 10 bullets, that doesn't make sense. And then sometimes if you do have a lot of bullets, one technique that can work well is to have a subheading. So you might break your experience into, your management experience and your product development experience within a job, and that will break up that longer list of bullets. There are a lot of articles you can read out there about applicant tracking systems and things. I think we don't always know what the keywords are. I would recommend reading a few things about it, but I would say look at the job description and also think about if you were searching for someone in that role, what are some keywords that you think would be likely to be used? And Jody's asking a good question here about a second resume, which is with experience that's not the most current experience. One trick here is to create 2, sometimes 3 different categories of experience. So you can have, instead of saying experience and going chronologically, you can say, like sometimes people will say, I don't know, political science experience and academic teaching experience. I've seen people with 2 different sets of experience like that. So one that draws attention to those categories, and then it lets you put jobs under those categories chronologically. So sometimes that will help move things up to be seen first. But just be aware of dates with that, because employers might be thrown off by dates that are not current, but you could still have those categories and it will draw attention to them. Okay, one thing that I sometimes see can be overlooked in a job search is it's easy to get focused on responding to particular job listings that you're seeing. It's also important to do research and target companies of interest to you. I'm highlighting here, there's an image of a book called The 2-Hour Job Search by Steve Dalton, which I think is a very easy and interesting read. And he has a whole methodology for brainstorming a really large list of employers, thinking about your motivation, prioritizing your motivation to work for them, identifying alums or other contacts at those employers, and then having a very methodical strategy for reaching out to people and having informational interviews or other networking conversations. Something I like that he talks about is he categorizes people who want to help and those people who feel sort of less interested or obligated to help, and those people who don't respond at all. And basically his advice is, when someone's not being responsive, try to move on to another contact. It can also be helpful to have A, B, and C companies, your dream companies, and then other companies that are plan B and plan C. So you're not only focusing on perhaps the most competitive employers out there. And again, following different companies, seeking out information on them helps you be a better job seeker for those companies. It's also really helpful. I like, in Boston, for example, I like the Boston Business Journal, and a lot of cities have their own business journal. And sometimes you'll get great tips there, which is, they're opening a new office, or they're laying people off, or they're expanding in some way, or they're growing a certain division of the company. So that lets you get ahead of the job listings. So when you're reading about a company, or you're following Fast Company magazine or other trade publications, it lets you start to do your outreach before there may be job listings. And Betsy's commenting on the 2-hour job search, and it is a complicated methodology. I'd be happy to talk with you about that some more. And so does, and Sandy's giving a good strategy here about keeping a log related to your contacts and your job search. And I highly recommend that, because over time it starts to get confusing. And the other nice thing about tracking is that you also see all the work that you're doing. I think sometimes people lose their motivation because they can't see what it is that they've been doing, or they think they're doing a lot and maybe they're not. So tracking is really useful for staying organized. Okay, just a few tips for interviews. We're covering a lot of different topics here, but obviously the interviewing, when your resume and your LinkedIn has been successful, now you get the interview. These are a few tips about preparing for interviews. It's really helpful to identify what are 3 to 5 things you want them to remember about you, and what are examples that you can use to back that up. So I think it just really helps to know, what is your goal? What am I trying to communicate? When I leave here, what are they going to remember about me? I'm sure many of you are familiar with behavioral questions that are geared towards asking you to tell about a time when. Tell me about a time when you had to influence your team, when you had to make a difficult decision, when you had to deliver bad news, when you had to lead a team towards a goal. So the strategy there is to have specific examples ready ahead of time. My suggestion is, if you develop 6 or so examples of accomplishments and projects, a lot of those examples can be used for different types of questions. So a story about teamwork might also be a story about leadership. So this will help you be more prepared. And the framework is to organize your answer in terms of the situation. What were you dealing with? Maybe an angry customer. What's the action that you took? How you calmed them down, how you went above and beyond to meet their needs, and what is the positive outcome? It might be that they wrote a letter to the president, or they stayed on as an important customer for your business. So I think having those ready is a great preparation tool. Think about, why should they hire you, and what's your unique value? If you're not clear on that, you're not going to be able to communicate that to the employer. And think about, you see yourself in relationship to your colleagues. What do you see that you bring to the table that's a little bit different from others? within a certain field, a lot of us are quite similar to our colleagues. So a group of career counselors or a group of accountants often have a lot of traits in common. So think about what it is that you offer. You also want to anticipate concerns or objections that an employer might have, maybe why you left your job, a gap, not having a certain skill set, a gap in your resume. So just anticipate those things and have a positive approach and an answer. You want to show that you've done your homework about the company, both through the website and other research that you might want to do. Let that come through in the interview. And lastly, they're always going to ask you for questions that you might have about the company, about the job or the company. So, and there's some questions that have become common, and they're still good questions, like understanding the culture of the office, understanding the goals of the position, and also just think about what else you might want to know going into this role, because the kinds of questions that you ask can also differentiate you from other candidates. Phone versus in-person interviews, yes, the phone screen has become extremely common. So one piece of that is being aware of your presence on the phone and your voice, and also having a good connection, being in a quiet place. Be aware that there can be more awkward pauses in a phone interview. And I also like trying to find on LinkedIn, find a picture of the person I'm going to be speaking with. I think that can help. But yeah, and realizing that you have less time, so being focused in your answers. The good news is you can have some notes with you, but don't let that be so much that you get distracted. And lastly, with interviewing, it's really about making a connection with the people that you're speaking with. So you want to, when it is in person, making eye contact. If it's by Skype or something like that, video conference, being aware to look at the camera on your computer so that you're looking at the people as well. I know from talking to alumni that people are sometimes dealing with some age issues in the workplace. So I just want to mention a few things that I think are helpful. So I do find that people at some point in their careers, 40-ish, mid-40s, 50s, do find some concern over age in some cases. I want you to know that you are allowed to not include your graduation years of your schools, so that can be helpful. You do need to still keep the years on your particular jobs, however. The other thing for everybody, actually, is you don't need to list every job that you've held. So what's typical is earlier jobs drop off. Something like 12 to 15 years of work history is the maximum that you would need. So that's often helpful, and it often relates to relevance of your work experience anyway. And I think all employers want to see evidence of technical skills, and they want to see evidence of continuous learning in your profession. So listing conferences and seminars and things that demonstrate your learning is really important. Again, everyone needs to emphasize skills and accomplishments at an interview. I think everyone needs to show their enthusiasm and their passion. I mean, ultimately, people want to hire people who have energy, who are enthusiastic about their work. And also with Dress for Success, everyone needs to know the environment that they're going into and what's the appropriate look. But also just make sure that your clothes, reflect the work you're going to be doing, that are a match with who you're going to be meeting with. One other thing that I've seen that can be helpful is some people have found greater success in different industries than the ones they've been in. Sometimes the university world or the nonprofit world has turned out to be a more successful place for a job search for some candidates. So being open to considering different industries can help. Okay.
Michele, can you elaborate more on your point about give 12 to 15 years of work history? There seems to be some questions about whether or not you stayed at a position for 8 years. Should you still have some positions older than that on your resume? and also if it shows breadth and depth for positions.
Okay. One thing to emphasize is if you have been with one employer for a while, if you did hold multiple positions there, that's really important to list the different positions and the bullets that go with those jobs and the years that you held that position. Also know that sometimes people will keep some earlier things on their resume because it shows a certain industry experience, or as long as you have a reason for why it's relevant. One thing that is an option sometimes for earlier experience is to just give the employer the title, the dates, the location, but not listing the bullets. So if you're tight on space or you're trying to keep it brief, that's a way to show that exposure, show what you were doing, but not take up as much space with it. So there's different things you could do. It should come down to supporting your goal and the relevance. And yeah, some of these things you have to talk through and decide which way to go. Lastly, notice what happens in interviews. Do people ask you about some of the earlier experience? Has it been helpful? So, something that can be both fun and challenging is that, let's say your resume, your LinkedIn is always a work in progress. You're always adjusting and tweaking, and sometimes that can be crazy making, but it is good to respond to what you're noticing out in the real world. Okay, some of you have been sharing tips for being productive. Some people, there was mention of a CRM tool for keeping track of everything. That's great. What are some other thoughts, either about being organized, staying productive with your goals, and also staying positive in a job search? All right, Jennifer's saying chunks of time dedicated to the job search and taking breaks. So both those things are really true. And knowing what works for you. Some people need to do blocks of time. Some people prefer goals. So once they do their goals, they're done. But looking at what's having a plan and taking breaks from it, because it can get tiresome. Yeah, having support, that is so critical. And knowing if there's people that are not supportive, don't talk to them about your job search. That's also important. But yes, deciding where you're going to get your support from, and I definitely recommend different job search groups, or even creating a group with other people that you know are in a job search. Gratitude journal, I like that, and meditation, all these things, bouncing ideas and having accountability with someone that you're going to check in with, holding you to your goals, which also might be a friend, it might be a career coach as well. Yeah, and talking to people so you can get different perspectives, that's really important. And 3 things every day you're grateful for. And yes, job searching can benefit from meditation as well as exercise. These are great ideas. And Paula is highlighting something that I think is important, just coming back to resumes and cover letters. Save all these things so that when you get called for an interview, you know what version of your documents that employer has. Because if you keep making changes, you won't know otherwise. Very important. And yeah, Jody's echoing this idea of spending 80% of your time on networking, which is also more fun than sitting at your computer. And also, just to mention with the networking piece, I think finding a way to network that is natural to you. You don't have to be a wild extrovert to be a good networker. And there's lots of books about introverts and networking that I think are useful. So finding a way that works for you. There's no one right way to do it. I just think it's important to be making connections. One idea for someone that's in a full-time job search, you might hear this idea of keeping some sort of work schedule. It doesn't have to be a full day, but just having a set schedule, and even wearing work clothes, so not doing your job search in your pajamas. You may find setting goals like the number of meetings or applications you're going to do per week. And I really recommend being mindful that you can do contract work, and also volunteering can be important. Employers may ask you, if you've been unemployed, what have you been doing since your last job? So whether it's contract work or volunteering, and volunteering can be a way to develop a new skill. It can also be very satisfying and make you feel good about your skill set while you're looking for a job. Contract work is also often a good foot in the door, not always a guaranteed foot in the door, but it's a way to start working somewhere, make contacts there, and that works really well for many people. And both parties get to test each other out. So you're actually going in a little bit more informed about the company and the work. And the other thing as a job seeker is to become aware, is there some skill set or software or whatever it is that I'm missing? Do I need to take some classes? How can I learn this new skill? Do I need to do a certificate program through Northeastern, or do I need a master's degree? So you do have to assess, how am I doing? What do I need to do differently? Contract work can come through staffing agencies and temp agencies. Sometimes there are ones that might be specialized. So I think asking around, like I know in human resources, sometimes there are some specialized accounting firms that do staffing. They may specialize in accounting work, whereas another firm has a different focus. So asking around. Oh, I missed, Joyce mentioned this Ditch Your Inner Critic at Work. I like the sound of that. And someone recently told me about Susan Peppercorn, and they recommended her. And we have the Positive Journal as another recommendation. Great. So some of these ideas we mentioned, but also, sometimes if you've gone through a tough interview process and didn't get the job, sometimes you just have to know when to take a break to recharge. And again, exercise, stress management, support, all of those are really critical. So, knowing when you're getting burned out and getting the right support, taking breaks, very important. I want to share a few Northeastern resources. So we'll continue to keep you informed about webinars, which we're already planning for the fall semester, some live events as well. I do provide individual coaching sessions and feedback to people, so you can get in touch with me if you'd like to schedule something. And our Career Center, which just changed their name to Employer Engagement and Career Design, also works extensively with alumni. And all of these things can be by phone or in person or by video conferencing. And we also keep an archive of these webinars, and I've provided the link there. And as I mentioned, please let me know if there are some topics that you think would be helpful to cover. So before I ask you to write down some action steps for yourself, I just want to see if there are any other questions that I can answer. Cover letters, so I didn't talk about that. I will say that I hear from some recruiters that the recruiters themselves, especially for larger organizations, I've heard recruiters say they don't look at them or care about them. I do think it's possible that hiring managers want to see them, so I would keep them brief. I still recommend including them. I know it's just we're in an interesting transition time. Cover letters, I would keep them brief. You can use bullets, and the idea is to highlight things. So your resume is a summary, but your cover letter is a pitch to a particular job. So you don't have to repeat your whole resume, just pull out some things that's evidence for your ability to do the job you're applying to. But I would definitely keep it brief. Don't let it get in the way of applying for a position, and just use it to highlight and sell yourself to that particular job. Okay, so just wrapping up. So please take a minute to jot down a few ideas of what's something that you heard today, or what's something that you're remembering that you want to do. What are some ideas that you heard that you're going to put into practice? So just take a minute to jot down a few ideas. And I invite you to share, as Jody has done, I invite you to share some of those ideas too, because other people may benefit from what you're thinking about. Feel free to add those as well. And actually, in response to Olivia's comment, actually, when you join a group on LinkedIn, even if the group's not lively, one benefit is that it gives you messaging access to other people in that group. So that's something I would definitely do. Thank you all for sharing some of these ideas. And actually, one thing I'm also remembering that I want to emphasize on LinkedIn is that LinkedIn has privacy settings. So take a look at those. Occasionally, I think this is changing, but sometimes people have made changes to their LinkedIn, and there's a notification that goes out to their network. So just look at what you have for privacy, make sure it matches what your goals are. Jennifer's asking about Indeed.com. I still like Indeed as a job search site because it pulls listings from other sources, including employers' websites. In terms of how often you should be checking job listings, I do like to recommend once or maybe twice a week, not every day. So again, that's going to help you focus more on networking. But job listings can help you see where there's some action with employers. And working with recruiters, work with ones that you're having a good experience with, ones that come recommended. Remember that recruiters have their own agenda that may or may not match your goals, but use ones that you find helpful for. And for those of you that are 0 to 5 years out, with career employer engagement and career design office, they still have NU careers. Again, those are geared towards jobs up to 5 years out, but that is still a source of job listings. A few of you have asked some questions. I'm happy to follow up with you after this session. So I think it's time for us to wrap up. I appreciate the great participation and the sharing of ideas here. We hope to see you at future events and webinars, or in person or by phone. So thank you all for coming, and please let me know if I can be helpful to you going forward. Thanks so much.